Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we welcome you to the portion of Liberty Nation Radio which we entitle Talkin Liberty, as we welcome back our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tim.
I deliberately left out the guardian of individual liberty part just so that I could separate it out and make it stand alone, because that's what you are for us. That is what you are for us.
Concerned that maybe I had been dropped from the from the roster,
from your guardianship.
Yeah,
exactly. Dropped from your guardianship. Well, you know, one of your states which you call home, New Jersey, has a bill to end religious exemptions from childhood vaccines. It has collapsed, but the Senate, the Democrats in the Senate, have vowed to fight on.
State Senate President Stephen Sweeney from a county I have spent a great deal of time in said that we will pass this bill. It's about public health, and we are ready to go to war over this. It's a knockdown, drag-out national story out of New Jersey about whether or not people have the right to keep their kids from being vaccinated. Tim, I think it's a public schools issue, really. Without the public schools, you don't have this issue. Private schools are free to demand or not vaccination schedules. But what we have here, I think, is an untenable tension between both sides, and both liberty interests are being infringed upon. On the one hand, you have, let's say, a family that's in favor of vaccinations, and they say, well, you've come and said you have to take my kid out of my home and send him to a government school, and you're going to put them next to somebody who may be have an infectious disease. It's untenable. On the other hand, you have some family who says we don't want to have our kid vaccinated, whether it's based on a religious reason or some other reason, and you have the state saying, oh, no, we're going to put a needle in their arm and put some solution into it because that's what we think is right. And I think, you know, liberty demands that we don't have the public schools so that we don't have these choices to make.
Well, the argument made for universal vaccinations with no exemptions is that vaccinations don't work unless everybody participates. Is that a legitimate argument?
Well, there's something called herd immunity, which is that we all benefit. You can have. There are certain people who can't take the vaccines, like they medically can't take them. They will die. They will get horrible illnesses, but they enjoy protection from the rest of us having the vaccinations. That's where the herd immunity comes in, where if some significant portion of the herd has the vaccine, then the rest will enjoy the immunity as well, because it won't spread. So that's sort of where that argument comes from. And that's a fine argument for encouraging people to just get vaccinated for various things. It's not, I think, a compelling argument for the forced vaccination of others.
Now, Scott, over the years, one of the things we've discussed over the 9 years of this program repeatedly is something called civil asset forfeiture. When the police stop you and take your things, take your money, take your clothes, take your personal belongings, whatever, they have claimed over the years that they get to keep that unless you can prove, you have to prove that you did not come to the, okay, screwed up.
You were actually great there. Yeah, you come to it
right,
from in an ill-gotten way. Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Scott, one of the things we've talked about many times over the 9 years of this program is something called civil asset forfeiture. And it's a matter of whether police have the right to simply keep your property if they've taken it from you.
That's about the size of it, Tim. They pull you over and say, we think that you've used this car in drug dealing, for instance, and we're going to seize it because you got it from the profits of drug dealing and it's used in drug dealing. Meanwhile, I think most Americans who aren't schooled on this topic would think, well, they would have to first charge you with being a drug dealer and criminally convict you for that before they could successfully seize your property. But that's not the case in many places in the United States. It's not the case. Federal law doesn't prohibit it, and some states do and some states don't. New Jersey has taken a big step forward in protecting their citizens with two bills they've passed that kind of work against that. One is an actual reporting requirement, Tim. Sadly, we don't even know what they're taking. We find out later when if somebody's either has enough money to hire a lawyer to fight for their stuff, or in the case of many of these cases, they get a public interest law firm in order to take their case and recover their funds. But there are innumerable cases that are truly tragic where you have a guy who's like saved up for a landscaping purchase and has thousands of dollars on them because they don't use the banks, and yet that's seen as some kind of indicator of drug activity without any evidence that they've done so. So the reporting requirement will be great because it'll at least allow us to see what they're taking from who and what's the disposition of that property. One of the real tragedies, one of the things that kind of sticks in everybody's craw who monitors this thing is a lot of times they use the property to benefit themselves. And what I mean by that is the police departments themselves will enjoy the fruits of this seizure, whether it's through equipment purchases or other things that they get to enjoy. So they then have a personal motivator to go out and take people's property. The other thing, Tim, is in some classifications of crimes in New Jersey, they will not be able to go forward with civil asset forfeiture unless there is a commensurate criminal conviction. And that, I think, is what Liberty demands. If the state can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you didn't do it, not only should they not be able to put you behind bars, which is the current law, but also they shouldn't be able to just take your stuff. Because what happens is people cannot, it's not cheap to hire a lawyer to get your stuff back. I mean, this is a crippling event in most people's lives who it happens to. And we should recognize that and act accordingly.
Okay, well, a law requiring mandatory inspections of rental properties has been challenged in another of the states you call home. We talked about New Jersey. Now we're talking about Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we're going around the horn.
Around the horn. This is Pottstown, PA.
And they won the case. This is a great win for Liberty, Tim. I like to bring these stories that I think some people would consider it a small thing or a minor thing, but it's where the rubber meets the road for a lot of people's liberty.
Exactly.
And a lot of towns have enacted these, renters are second-class citizens in so many ways, and that's what this law says, that rental properties should be subject to inspection every 2 years. And what that does is, you can imagine if they just said it for homeowners, that every 2 years a government employee would be entitled to come in and inspect your home. Well, why? Well, for good health and safety. Well, why are renters not in charge of their own good health and safety together with their landlords? It's preposterous that this perfectly legal way of occupying real property is somehow entitles the government to invade the space.
Well, I can tell you, Scott, having been a forced member of homeowners associations and a member of one right now, there is certainly, there's a caste system. Okay, on that note, thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, where past is prologue. All available on demand at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week. Same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.